Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Rain slicked the city streets, neon bleeding across puddles like fractured memories. I hugged my coat tighter, shivering, though the chill wasn't just in the air. 3 weeks since the breakup. 3 weeks of staring at apartment walls that seemed to close in every night. Silence had become a physical presence, thick, uncomfortable, invasive. I ducked into a dim thrift store on Fifth Avenue, the bell above the door jingling faintly, competing with the hum of the fluorescent lights. I needed something, anything, a distraction. Halloween was coming, and I hadn't planned a costume, hadn't felt like planning anything at all. That's when I saw it, a vintage velvet suit, black with subtle silver embroidery, hanging on a rack that sagged under the weight of decades. It looked alive, not in a supernatural sense, just aware. I slipped it onto the hanger, felt the fabric chill my fingertips. "You've got an eye for the unusual," a voice said. I turned. A man stood near the register. Mid-30s, calm eyes, a smile that felt both gentle and knowing. He didn't loom, didn't push. He just observed. "I like it," I said. He tilted his head. "It likes you too." I laughed, though it sounded brittle. He didn't. Not in the joking way. There was something in his gaze, the way he noticed the crease of my sleeves, the tension in my shoulders. Something that made me feel seen. We talked briefly, about the costume, the store, trivial things. And yet, in those minutes, I felt unburdened. Someone paying attention without judgment. It had been a long time since I felt that. I bought the suit. That night, I tried it on in my apartment. The fabric was impossibly soft, almost liquid against my skin. Something shifted. Not in the air. In me. I checked my reflection in the window. My face looked the same. But my posture, my expression, it felt sharper, darker, more confident than I remembered. I shook it off. Just Halloween spirit. By the next day, strangers on the street glanced at me differently. The barista at my cafe smiled wider than usual, lingering on my name when she wrote it on my cup. Mara. That's when I realized the suit seemed to carry expectations. Not mine, someone else's. Then I met him again. He appeared at the cafe where I worked, sitting at the same corner table I favored. He ordered a black coffee without sugar, exactly like me. When our eyes met, it wasn't surprise. It was recognition. "Busy day?" he asked. I nodded. "You come here often?" He smiled faintly. "I've been watching for a while. You're predictable, in a comforting way. I should have left. I should have felt alarmed. But I didn't. Not yet." His attention felt safe. Needed even. Weeks passed. I started noticing impossible coincidences. Emails in my inbox with playlists I'd drafted but never sent. A voice note left on my phone, his voice, reciting my favorite line from a book I hadn't mentioned aloud in years. A social media comment from a burner account, knowing the nickname only my ex had used. I rationalized. I had to. "I'm overthinking," I told myself. "Maybe it's harmless," I whispered into the apartment silence. But the suit, it changed me more than I expected. Each morning, I woke with new habits. A sharper tongue, a colder glance, movements that felt rehearsed rather than natural. Friends noticed. "You're different," they said. I smiled, not unkindly, hiding the truth. I wasn't entirely myself anymore. The first night it happened fully was when I tried to remove the suit. It wouldn't come off. Zippers stuck. Buttons refused. I tugged, cursed, panicked. The reflection in the window stared back with a face I didn't recognize. Confident, predatory, beautiful, terrifying. And then my phone buzzed. "Relax. Don't fight it. You look amazing." I spun. No one was there. He came into my life more insistently after that. Always calm, always aware. Knows my routines. Knows when I sip my coffee too fast, when I leave the bathroom light on, the exact brand of tea I buy. A detailed knowledge of me that should have terrified me. But I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. I murmured as I let him sit beside me on the park bench one rainy night. Rain tapped the brim of his hat, pooling in puddles at our feet. Neon from the street lamps fractured in the wet asphalt. "You're safe with me," he said softly. "I see you. Truly." I wanted to believe it, but then came the impossible details. He hummed a tune my mother used to play when I was a child, though I hadn't heard it in decades. He knew my favorite spot at the library, the cafe where I hid when I wanted to be alone, even my old email passwords. I told myself, it's coincidence, a lucky guess, a careful observer, but the suit whispered otherwise. I tried to distance myself. No reply to messages. Avoided the cafe. Even stayed home, hiding in my apartment, curtains drawn, windows fogged with condensation. But the phone buzzed anyway. Notes, photos, a video of me sleeping, the suit draped neatly across a chair like it had waited patiently. I felt invaded, violated, but also strangely flattered, confused, weak. Halloween night arrived. Fog rolled in off the river, swirling around streetlights, casting shadows that seemed to move with intention. I wore the suit despite my fear. It clung to me, a second skin, whispering promises of power I didn't trust. He appeared outside my building, leaning casually against the wet brick. I didn't knock. I didn't run. I only watched, heart hammering. "You look perfect," he said, voice low. "Exactly as you should be." I realized then, he didn't want me. He wanted the version of me the suit created. The identity it stole, the one I could barely recognize myself in. I ran. Through the wet streets, the suit damp and heavy, the city lights fractured across puddles. Footsteps followed. Distant sirens wove into the rhythm of my panicked heartbeat. I ducked into a cafe still open, the scent of roasted beans and sugar briefly grounding me. "Police?" I whispered into the phone, trembling. Yes. They came, took notes, collected the evidence, burner phones, photos, metadata tracing years of obsessive tracking. They called it stalking, manipulation, identity theft. I walked away that night, leaving him behind, leaving the suit behind. Weeks later, in my silent apartment, I stared at my reflection. The suit was gone, yet I felt different, sharper, wary, guarded. I could trace the edges of his manipulations in my memory, feel the echo of the person I had been. I thought about trust, about privacy, about the insidious way someone could know you, not just your routines, but your desires, your fears, your habits you thought secret, about the thin line between attention and obsession, care and control. I realized that safety is never absolute, that memory is malleable, that identity can be nudged, twisted, coerced, sometimes without a single hand touching you. I closed the curtains. Rain tapped the glass. Neon reflected off puddles outside. I listened to the hum of my refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren, the soft jazz drifting from a neighbor's apartment. And I understood, finally, freedom isn't just surviving the danger outside. It's surviving the changes it leaves inside. I am me again, mostly, but some part of him lingers. Somewhere between the folds of velvet and shadow, I carry the knowledge that identity, once observed and manipulated, is never entirely yours again. Story 2. Rain slid down the neon-lit streets like liquid glass. The city smelled of wet asphalt and coffee. I walked slowly, hoodie up, scarf tight around my neck, pretending the chill kept me warm, though really it was the silence I sought. After the divorce, after him, I had learned the quiet could be both comforting and suffocating. I hadn't meant to go to the Halloween market. I hadn't meant to stop at the stall with the dusty, ornate mirror, its edges carved like twisted vines. But something about it, its crooked charm, the way it caught the candlelight, made me pause. "You'll find what you're looking for in it," the old man said, voice like dry leaves. I smiled politely, but I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what I was looking for. The mirror fit awkwardly in the corner of my new apartment, leaning against the wall beside my bed. The first night, I caught myself staring. I'd been trying to rebuild, trying to carve a life out of silence, coffee-stained notebooks, and empty streets. I'd been lonely enough to notice things that weren't quite right. At first, it was subtle, a twitch of a smile I hadn't made, a tilt of my head that didn't match my own. I told myself I was tired, post-divorce brain, stress, but the mirror didn't tire. 2 weeks in, I started noticing the little discrepancies. My reflection humming when I wasn't, tracing the rim of my coffee mug with fingers that weren't mine. I told myself I was imagining it. My apartment was small. The light was strange. And then came the first voice note. My phone buzzed late at night, an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before opening it. "Hey," a calm, warm voice said. "I like the way you arrange your books." I froze. The voice sounded intimate, familiar, like someone who knew all the corners of me. But I didn't know anyone who could. I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe a friend? A wrong number. I deleted it. It didn't stop. At first, the messages were small. Comments on my Instagram photos, messages about my daily routine, always phrased with that unnerving empathy. "You look cold today. Did you drink enough water?" I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe someone had just been watching, caring. Then he or whoever started showing up in real life. Cafes I frequented, rainy sidewalks, the buzz of a neon sign. Always at a distance, observing, silent, patient. When he finally approached me, I felt an odd safety, a relief I hadn't known in months. He was gentle, attentive, intelligent, the kind of person who notices when you shift in your seat, who remembers the song you hummed 2 days ago. "Do you like jazz?" he asked once, leaning casually against the doorframe of the cafe. "There's a place a few blocks down. Live music tonight. I thought you might like it." I wanted to trust him. I told myself I could, and I did. But then the details started bleeding through the cracks. Small, impossible details. My favorite mug, a song I hadn't played in years, the pattern of my curtains. My old nickname from college, one I hadn't told anyone here. I froze every time. Maybe I'm overthinking, I whispered to myself in the empty apartment. But the unease didn't leave. I started noticing signs everywhere. Footsteps in hallways that weren't mine. The hum of my fridge interrupted by soft knocks on the door. Emails I didn't send, drafts saved in my own account. Metadata showing locations I hadn't been to. Fake profiles on social media that looked like me. The mirror became more than a mirror. It became a witness. My reflection no longer mimicked. It observed, waited, learned. I stopped sleeping. The rain tapping my window sounded like fingers tracing a pattern only I could hear. The jazz from the cafe downstairs twisted into dissonance. Even the silence of my apartment was heavy with presence. He called me by my old nickname once, over a burner phone, late at night. I could hear the rain, my own breathing, a distant siren. "I've been watching you rebuild," he said softly. "You're stronger than you think." I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I traced every interaction, every message. He knew everything, and yet he was careful. Never reckless, never violent, only present, always observing, always patient. By Halloween, the air had a metallic edge. The city smelled of smoke, wet leaves, and fried sugar. I left my apartment early, hoping to distract myself with the market, the neon, the chatter. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The mirror in my apartment had started moving on its own. Not violently, not suddenly. Just a tilt here, a pause there. Always when I wasn't looking. My reflection no longer mirrored my gestures perfectly. It started stepping slightly ahead, anticipating me, smiling when I did not. And then I saw it. I stepped back, heart thudding. The reflection, my reflection, stayed in place as I moved. Its eyes locked on mine with a precision I couldn't explain. And slowly, impossibly, it stepped out of the mirror. I stumbled back, the room spinning. The reflection, him, whoever he was, looked exactly like me, down to the tilt of my jaw, the shadow under my eyes. And yet not me. "You don't know me," he whispered. His voice was mine, distorted, calm, patient. "But I know you. Every corner, every fear, every secret." The apartment shrank around me. The humming of the fridge, the soft jazz, the ticking of the clock, it all became a cage. I ran, down the stairs, into the foggy street. Neon lights bounced off puddles, fractured by rain. He followed, silent, patient. Not a step faster than me, not a step behind. I called the police. They arrived hours later. He was gone. No footprints in the rain, no fingerprints, nothing. Just a lingering sense of presence, like the air itself remembered him. Days passed. Weeks. The apartment felt hollow. The mirror was gone, stolen, I assumed, or maybe moved. But the memory stayed. The whispers and reflections. The small, impossible details. The way someone could enter your life without permission and map your mind like a city. I moved again, reluctantly. Tried to rebuild. Tried to sleep. But sometimes at night, I catch myself staring at windows, at mirrors, at the flickering glow of my laptop. And I hear it, my voice soft, patient, intimate. Always waiting. I learned that trust is a fragile architecture. That someone could live in the space between your perception and reality and never be caught. That privacy is not a guarantee, but a fleeting illusion. And sometimes when the rain hits the pavement just right, I feel the tilt of eyes in the darkness, calculating, remembering. A reflection that watches back is no longer yours to command. I survive, but I am changed, always changed, because memory is a trap, and identity can be stolen. Story 3. I arrived in Harvest Hollow on a rainy Thursday evening. The town had that washed-clean quiet you notice only when you're alone. Neon signs flickered against wet asphalt, puddles reflecting letters upside down. I walked past the cafe where the faint hum of espresso machines spilled into the street, smelled cinnamon and burnt sugar drifting through the fog. My apartment above the bakery was silent except for the soft, constant buzz of the fridge. I had moved here to rebuild. Divorce papers in the glove compartment, a few boxes stacked in corners, my life folded into cardboard. I told myself it was just a fresh start. Just me. Just the city's muted rhythm and the occasional soft jazz drifting from somewhere down the block. But loneliness clings in the quiet, in the small pause between a door closing and the next sound, in the echo of your own thoughts. The festival came up on the town calendar. Harvest Hollow Annual Harvest Festival. It said in cheerful orange letters. I bought tickets online, almost on impulse, wanting some connection, human warmth, even for a few hours. I met them at the edge of the corn maze, Alex, Mara, and Simon. I don't know why I told them my name was Lena. It felt safer, more contained. The maze itself looked normal. Corn stalks tall, dry, their edges rustling in the evening wind. But the moment I stepped in, the air shifted. The smell of damp earth, rotting leaves, faint smoke from the festival fires beyond, it clung to me. Every step crunched against hidden roots. Shadows moved differently here, bending light that shouldn't bend. The whispers started softly, almost inaudible at first, like fragments of conversation drifting through the stalks. Are you cold? I froze. The voice wasn't familiar. I told myself it was the wind. Alex laughed nervously. Feels like it wants to get under your skin, doesn't it? I nodded. My throat felt tight. I told myself it was the weather, the maze. I wanted to believe it. Hours later, we reached the center. A small clearing, dead silence except for the faint rustle of corn. Mara pulled out her phone. Signal's weak, she said. I barely have reception. I noticed my own phone buzzing in my pocket. A notification from an unknown number. I know you like the cafe on 5th at 8 a.m. I laughed it off. Probably spam. I told myself it made sense, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter. Over the next few days, messages started appearing everywhere. On social media, dating apps, emails, sometimes as subtle as a song I had favorited weeks ago popping up in a suggested playlist. Every message, every post, every note felt like someone tracing my fingers over my thoughts, leaving fingerprints only I could feel. Then he appeared. Marcus. I met him at the cafe on 5th, exactly where the message predicted. He smiled gently, eyes calm. You're Lena, right? He said. I nodded. Something in him was soothing, attentive. He listened without interrupting, remembered small details. My favorite seat by the window, how I stirred my coffee, the way I twisted my scarf. I wanted to believe him. I told myself I was overthinking. We walked in the rain. Neon reflections shimmered on wet streets. The cold touched my cheeks. He matched my pace, adjusted his umbrella so it covered both of us without asking. He knew my routines before I told him. I rationalized it. Small towns, coincidence, maybe he'd seen me before. But the maze haunted me. I started seeing it everywhere, in the way shadows bent in corners, in the hushed tone of people who smiled too knowingly. He asked if I'd go back with him to see it again. I hesitated, but curiosity won, and I told myself it made sense. The maze had grown since my last visit. The paths twisted impossibly. Stalks leaned closer, rustling with voices I thought were mine. You're not safe. You shouldn't be here. You can't escape. Marcus walked beside me. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't need to. He seemed to know every turn, every hidden route. Follow me, he said calmly. You'll be fine. A rustle behind me. I spun, but the path was empty. My heart raced. He noticed. It's just nerves, he said. You're imagining things. And I believed him. I had to. Later, I realized he knew more than anyone should. My old nickname from my ex, the name of the cafe barista who remembered me, the street I used to run on at dawn. He even hummed a melody I had only ever whistled alone. I stopped telling myself it was coincidence, but I also didn't stop following him. Something about the calm in his voice, the steadiness of his eyes, made me want to lean in, to trust. The maze shifted at night. Fog rolled in, dense as wool, wetting my hair and chilling my skin. I could hear footsteps that weren't mine, breathing too close, and faint laughter that sounded like mine but wasn't. I thought about leaving, but my phone buzzed with a message. Don't go yet. I'll keep you safe. I panicked. Tried to leave. The paths led back to the same clearing. Stalks rustled like whispering ghosts, moving against the wind. You can't leave, Marcus said, appearing from the mist. Calm, observing. Not yet. Not until you see. The voices in the corn weren't whispers anymore. They were sentences, reading out my fears, my secrets, my shame. I could hear the arguments I'd had, the late night sobbing, the things I'd buried. I shouldn't have come, I whispered. You're here, he said, and it wasn't a question. Hours, or maybe days, passed. Time stretched, elastic, bending around the maze. I saw faces in the stalks, memories I thought I had hidden. I realized the maze didn't just reflect fear. It consumed it. It consumed me. When I finally broke through to the edge of the cornfield, the police were there. They had my apartment, my devices, my emails. Evidence. Photos. Logs. Marcus had been orchestrating every step. The festival, the maze, the messages, the songs, the playlists. Every comfort was a trap. Every whisper, a manipulation. He was arrested. Multiple victims came forward. Fake identities. Burned accounts. Long-term obsession. The kind of calculated, patient horror that hides behind attentiveness, behind empathy. I survived. But when I went home, the silence felt different. My apartment smelled the same, my fridge hummed the same, but I could hear traces of him in every quiet. The way the door clicked, the soft rustle of curtains, the faint echo of a song I didn't remember playing. The festival passed. The maze was torn down, but the memory lingered in shadows, in reflections on wet streets, in the way the town seemed too quiet at night, in the phone buzz that never came, but I still imagined it. I realized trust is fragile. Privacy is illusionary. Obsession can wear the mask of care. And the self, the one you think is safe, is more malleable than you ever admit. I walk now with awareness. Every touch, every smile, every text, a careful measurement. I don't rage at what happened. I reflect. I catalog. I survive. Sometimes, when the wind rustles the dead leaves outside my window, I swear I hear the corn. And I remember, fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, patient. And it waits in the spaces you thought were safe. I'm not the same. And I'm not safe, not completely. But I am here, breathing, watching, learning, and maybe finally, understanding what it means to truly guard yourself. Story 4. Rain tapped lightly against the window of my new apartment. The city smelled of wet asphalt and neon reflections bouncing off slick sidewalks. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the muted glow of my laptop. Dating apps were open, notifications blinking, but I couldn't swipe. I couldn't commit to anything, not yet. Not after the divorce, the nights of silence filled with my own voice echoing in my head. The breakup had left a hollow I didn't know how to fill. I thought relocating would help. It didn't. I only replaced familiar walls with unfamiliar ones, new cafes with new chairs, new streets with new emptiness. Then I saw the pumpkin patch. It wasn't much. A small field on the outskirts, orange shapes glowing faintly under the streetlights. I didn't know why I drove there. Maybe because I needed something alive, something unjudging. The air smelled of damp soil, and mist clung to my coat as I walked. The pumpkins seemed ordinary, heavy and round, but there was something in the way the shadows pooled between them, like they weren't just carved from flesh-colored orange, but from the memory of something else. I didn't hear him at first, but then a voice. Calm, warm, observant. You like this one? I jumped. A man was standing beside me, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, hood drawn low. Not threatening, attentive, curious. It's bright, I said. Like you. I blinked. Heat rose in my chest. I wanted to believe he was harmless. I told myself it made sense. The patch was quiet. People came and went. Maybe he just knew how to speak softly. We walked among the pumpkins. I mentioned the divorce. He listened. Really listened. He asked questions I hadn't told anyone, things that were supposed to be private. It's been hard to start over, hasn't it? Yes. You deserve better, he said. Not patronizing. Genuine. I believed him. And that was the first mistake. He started appearing in my life like a shadow that mirrored me. First at the coffee shop I frequented, he knew my order. Black coffee, single shot, oat milk. Then at the bookstore, lingering near the philosophy section. I told myself I wasn't imagining it. I told myself coincidence happens, but the coincidences multiplied. He knew my old nickname. He hummed a song my ex and I used to play in the car. He mentioned the apartment complex I'd lived in for only a few months, details I hadn't shared online. I told myself I wasn't in danger. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was comforting. Then came the pumpkin. I had bought a small orange one for my balcony. I carved it, just to have something to distract myself from the quiet hum of my apartment. The moment I cut into it, I heard a whisper, faint, like wind through a crack in the wall. She's alone tonight. I froze, heart hammering. The voice wasn't mine. I dropped the knife. Nothing in the pumpkin could make a sound like that. I told myself it was my imagination. I wanted to believe it, but he appeared at my door that night, calm, holding a similar pumpkin. I thought you'd like company. How did you? I couldn't finish the question. I just know, he said. His smile was gentle, but it carried a weight that settled in my chest. I see things. I notice. I laughed nervously. You're very observant. Observant, he corrected softly. I think that's important, especially for people like us. From then on, my apartment was no longer mine alone. My emails had strange metadata, read receipts from unknown devices. My social media was active in ways I hadn't authorized. The pumpkin whispers grew louder, more precise. You left the window open. You drank too much coffee today. Every little sound became a signal. Rain tapping windows. Footsteps in the hall, humming of my fridge. Even the soft jazz from the cafe downstairs seemed tuned to me. I was awake all night, tracing the sounds, analyzing them, listening. I wanted to believe I could handle it. I told myself it made sense. He suggested we meet at the pumpkin patch again. It's quieter than the city. You'll feel safer. I went. The fog was thick, curling around my ankles. I could barely see the pumpkins, but I could feel him. He knew I was there before I saw him, as if he had been waiting, as if he knew every step I would take. He spoke my thoughts before I could voice them. He named memories I hadn't told him, intimate, raw, embarrassing memories I hadn't even written down. I panicked. I don't know how you. I tried to stop myself. He tilted his head. It's not about knowing. It's about paying attention. And I have. To you. The rational part of me screamed. Digital footprints, tracking apps, burner phones, AI voice cloning, they were all possible. Everything was possible, and yet, part of me still wanted to believe. That part was fragile, needy, alone. Then he left. Or maybe I left. I don't remember. Only that the whispers in my pumpkin followed me home. The days blurred. Every time I left, he was there. Every time I logged online, he had left a trace. Voice notes of me humming. Photos I hadn't taken. Invitations to cafes I hadn't visited yet. I tried to change routines. I changed passwords. I even bought a new phone. He adapted. I called the police. They listened. Took notes. Digital harassment, one said. We'll look into it. But there was no immediate evidence. Only my own fear, my own spiraling thoughts. I stopped carving pumpkins. The whispers became internal. I doubted myself. My reflection in the window didn't feel like mine. I started leaving my apartment randomly, sometimes walking for hours in the rain, watching neon reflections stretch across puddles, listening for footsteps that might not exist. Then came the confrontation. He showed up at my door with a folder. Calm, smiling. I think you'll want to see this. Inside were photographs. Every cafe I had been to. Every step I had taken in the last month. Screenshots of messages, recordings of calls, every digital breadcrumb I'd left. He knew me better than I knew myself. You see, he said, I care. That's all. I couldn't move. My own fear was a cage. I called the police again. This time they believed me. They traced devices, burners, metadata, fake profiles. The obsessive web of attention he had spun was finally visible. His name, not the one he'd given me. Multiple victims in other towns. Each one a whisper in a pumpkin, I realized, each one a shadow he carried and watched. They arrested him outside the pumpkin patch. I watched from a distance, rain washing over him. His eyes found mine once. Quiet, calm, observant, like he had known I was watching. Back in my apartment, I left the pumpkins uncarved. I left my windows closed. I moved slowly, cautiously, aware of every reflection in the glass, every distant hum, every phone buzz. The city never stopped raining. Neon lights glimmered off wet asphalt, indifferent to my survival. I walked the streets alone, not in fear anymore, but in understanding. Safety had a price. Privacy had a price. Trust had a price. And sometimes, late at night, when the city hummed, I wondered if the shadows of the past would ever stop whispering. Not the stalker's shadows, my own. The ones I carried inside me. The ones that reminded me, people can see more than you show. People can learn the contours of your mind. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to never stop noticing yourself. I lit a single candle on the balcony. Its glow reflected in the rain-spattered glass. The pumpkin beside it remained silent. For now, because the world always listens, even when you whisper. Story 5. I didn't notice the rain at first. Just a soft drizzle, tapping against the windshield as I drove through the city streets. Neon signs reflecting in puddles like fractured glass. My life felt fractured too. The divorce was final last week. The apartment I'd shared with him now stood empty, like a memory I could almost reach but couldn't touch. I kept telling myself that moving was a step toward clarity, toward rebuilding. But the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The mansion appeared at the edge of the city, hidden behind a veil of fog and iron gates that groaned when I pushed them open. The broker had promised character, and it had that. Dust motes floated in the air, sunlight fractured through stained glass, and the wood smelled of history, musty, bitter, and familiar in a way that pricked at my chest. I felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from something unnameable, as if the walls themselves had watched, waited. I unpacked slowly. Each object, books, clothes, pictures, placed with care. The house hummed around me. Pipes, a heater clicking in the corner, the refrigerator's low drone. Silence felt heavy, almost alive. I slept poorly that first night. Woke at 3 to a floorboard creak outside my door. I told myself it was nothing, the house settling. Maybe I was overthinking. Weeks passed. I wandered the neighborhood, cafes with fogged-up windows, jazz filtering through the glass. Rain-slick streets reflected my own tired face. I started journaling again, scribbling in broken sentences, trying to anchor myself to something I could call mine. But each morning, the journal felt lighter. Certain words, certain thoughts, slipped away by the time I had my coffee. That was when I first noticed the emails. Small, almost polite, but personal. I saw your post about the cafe on Mulberry, the one you love with the blue chairs. My heart thumped. How could they know that? I didn't reply. I told myself it was coincidence. Then I met her. Sophie. Her voice was soft, knowing, like she'd memorized the sound of my life. She appeared at the bookstore when I lingered over old photography books. You always choose the sad ones, she said, and I froze. Sad ones? How did she know? She smiled, gentle, and the tension eased. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she had good intuition. Over coffee, she seemed to know everything without asking. Favorite songs, the way I stirred sugar into tea, the shortcut I always took through the alley behind my apartment. I laughed it off. You're psychic, I said. She tilted her head, not mocking, just curious. Maybe, she said. Then came the small impossibilities. Notes slipped under my door, handwritten in my own script, though I never wrote them. A photograph on my desk, me sleeping, morning light catching my hair. No one should have been there. I tried to rationalize. Maybe I'd left it myself? I laughed bitterly at the thought. The house changed too. Rooms seemed different when I wasn't looking. Shadows lingered longer. Reflections in windows weren't quite right. My reflection sometimes smiled when I didn't. I stopped trusting mirrors. One night, the humming fridge synchronized with a soft vibration in my phone. A voice note from Sophie. I know you're awake. Calm. Observant. Invasive. My pulse raced. I left the message unplayed. I told myself it wasn't her. Maybe it was a glitch. Gradually, I noticed the little things. The way my mail was opened before I got it, bookmarks and books I hadn't read, apps I never downloaded appearing on my phone. She, or someone knew my routines, my habits. My loneliness had been a map, and someone had traced it with precision. The house didn't just hold me, it rewrote me. Names I could not remember disappeared from memory. Habits, long-held quirks, even flashes of my childhood seemed to evaporate. And in their place were fragments that weren't mine. A laugh I didn't recognize, a fear I never felt before, memories of dinners I never attended. Every night, I woke a little less myself. Sophie's presence was constant. She arrived at the exact moments I felt most vulnerable. A knock at the door when the house felt especially quiet. Coffee on the table before I had even left the bed. I thought you might need this, she said. Her eyes were soft, but her knowledge was precise. I wanted to trust her. I clung to her attentiveness as if it could anchor me to reality. Then the notes escalated. Metadata and photos, GPS locations of places I hadn't visited that day, digital footprints I thought I had deleted. Every private space felt invaded. I started locking doors, changing passwords, using burner phones, but nothing helped. I could feel the gaze, her gaze, even when the apartment was empty. I tried leaving. The streets were empty, neon blurred in puddles. Footsteps behind me, light and careful. I turned. No one. The city felt complicit, a mirror of my disorientation. I returned home, afraid to face the apartment, but more afraid to face the cold, indifferent streets. Then I saw the truth. Photos on my wall, all taken from angles only Sophie, or the house, could have known. Letters, once private, were answered before I even wrote them. My reflection in the mirror held a stranger's eyes. I confronted her. I know you, I said, voice shaking. She smiled, not cruelly, just fully aware. You let me, she said. Her calmness was terrifying. You left doors open, windows unlocked. You wanted someone to understand you. I just remembered for you. For weeks, she had been inhabiting me, the house had been erasing me, and I had been willing. I realized then, I had been lonely enough to surrender. My identity, my trauma, my life, she had folded into it, stitched her memory over mine. The confrontation escalated. I called the police. Evidence was gathered, surveillance, digital records, multiple identities, tracking devices, AI-generated voice notes. Sophie's persona fractured under exposure. Her obsession was years long, a network of victims, all slowly erased, all slowly rewritten. The mansion, with its creaks and hums and shadows, was the perfect instrument for someone like her. I left the house finally. Rain washed over my coat, neon bleeding through puddles. Every step away felt like reclaiming pieces of myself, though some were irretrievably gone. I moved into a small apartment, quiet but alive, where I could hear only the city's natural rhythm. Distant sirens, footsteps on the pavement, the hum of neon, my own breathing. I write this now, late at night. My journal is heavy with memories, some mine, some borrowed, some stolen. Every word I reclaim is a small act of defiance. I have learned the fragility of trust, the malleability of identity, the terror of someone who can observe you more closely than you observe yourself. Sometimes I still wake in the middle of the night to a knock, a vibration, a whisper of familiarity in an empty room. And I remember, memory is not always ours to keep, and safety is never absolute. But I survive, and survival has its own kind of intimacy. We leave pieces of ourselves everywhere, in rooms, in words, in digital footprints. And someone somewhere may pick them up, rearrange them, make them their own. That's the quiet horror of being human. Boundaries exist only until they don't, and identity is always negotiable, always, in the wrong hands, dangerously fragile. I keep my doors locked now. I keep my journals hidden. I keep my memories close. And yet, every time the rain taps the window, neon bleeding into puddles outside, I wonder, which of these reflections is mine, and which belongs to the house that forgot? Story 6. The rain had a taste of iron. Cold and wet and sharp against my skin as I walked past shuttered cafes and flickering neon. Halloween night in this city was quieter than it should have been. Empty streets, puddles reflecting streetlights like fractured stars, and the occasional distant laughter that never reached my alley. I had moved here after everything broke. The apartment felt too big and too empty, the walls too white, the hum of the refrigerator the only companion that stayed. Some nights, I'd sit by the window and watch the fog curl around street lamps, thinking about how fragile it all felt. My life, my sense of safety, even the memory of myself. It started with the missing children. Just stories at first. Local news snippets about kids following some strange lantern into the woods and never returning. I told myself not to get caught up in the fear. I was supposed to be careful, rational, but the images lingered. Tiny hands reaching, shadows twisting, silence swallowing. Halloween night, curiosity got the better of me. I took the path leading toward the forest at the edge of the city. Leaves slick with rain, mud squelching under my boots, the smell of damp earth mixing with the faint metallic tang of blood that wasn't there, at least not yet. Then I saw it, a lantern, glowing like it had swallowed the last drop of sunlight. It bobbed along the path as if carried by an invisible hand. And behind it, children laughing softly, stepping into the mist. I froze. My chest hurt. Something in me wanted to run, and something else wanted to follow. I followed, quietly, every step measured, footfalls swallowed by the mud and fog. "Why are you here?" a voice said behind me. Calm, soft, deliberate. Not the children. I turned. A boy maybe 18. Dark coat, pale face. His eyes, too knowing, like he had read the corners of my mind before I even noticed them. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was precise. "You shouldn't follow," he said. Not angry. Observant. Penetrating. "You might see things you weren't meant to see." I had to," I said, voice barely audible over the rain tapping the leaves. "I needed to know. Curiosity is dangerous," he said, and he led me, not forward, but sideways, weaving through trees, shadows hugging every branch. He didn't hold my hand, didn't touch me, but I felt the weight of his presence like a tether. That was the first time I saw the Lantern Man. A skeletal figure, tall, impossibly thin, draped in shadows. Lanterns hanging from hooks along its arms, and in each lantern a child. Not the children themselves, but their last moments. The fear, the laughter, the final breath. All trapped in amber light. I vomited. I stumbled back. My heart beat in my throat. The boy, my guide, I told myself, caught me. Calm, patient, almost tender. I told you, he said. Some things cannot be unseen. I wanted to leave, but the forest had changed. The fog had thickened. Every tree looked like a claw, and the lantern man, silent, patient, watched. He spoke, and I realized then that the figure, the boy, and the lanterns were connected. Every detail, every movement orchestrated. My guide's eyes flicked toward my coat zipper, the way I kept checking my phone. You notice patterns, he said. You always have. That's why you're alive. Alive. The word echoed. Over the next week, he didn't vanish. I kept seeing him, on the street, in cafes, sometimes just in the reflection of shop windows. Always distant, always patient, attentive. Every time I thought I was imagining it, my phone would buzz. A message from an unknown number. You walked the path again. I saw you. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I told myself it made sense. Maybe someone was obsessed with the legend. Maybe someone had been in the woods too. But the small impossibilities accumulated. He knew my favorite coffee order. He knew my routine, the songs I hummed while cooking. My old nickname from high school, never shared with anyone. I stopped sleeping. My apartment felt alive. The hum of the fridge became a rhythm I couldn't ignore. Footsteps crept across the floorboards above, though no one lived there. Doors I was sure I had locked were ajar. Emails in my inbox were drafts I didn't remember saving, metadata showing times and places I had never been. And then the photos appeared. On my phone, children in the lanterns, their eyes wide, their fear etched into the glowing light. But there was one lantern that showed me following the path, alone, heart racing, the reflection of my own terror captured perfectly. I ran to the police, showed them the images, the lanterns, the children, the fog. They listened politely, nodded, said they'd investigate. They couldn't. There was nothing tangible. No prints, no evidence, just photos and the story. And I was left with the boy, the guide, the observer, always knowing, always waiting. Weeks later, the confrontation came. He cornered me in the apartment lobby, calm, hands in his pockets, eyes sharp. I've been patient, he said. I wanted to show you, let you see. You're perceptive, worth watching. You're sick, I whispered. You've been following me. Following? His lips curved into a near smile. I've been observing, learning, appreciating. You're meticulous, careful, the kind of person who notices shadows in the corner, who remembers what others forget. I shook my head, tried to run, but the lobby was empty, the city silent except for the distant wail of a siren and the hum of the neon outside. The police arrived minutes later. Burner phones, fake profiles, digital footprints, a campaign spanning months, maybe years. Victims in other cities, stories buried, evidence collected. He was arrested. The lantern man, they said, a collector of fear and memory, a stalker whose fascination had become obsession. And yet, even free of him, I could still feel the weight of observation. The quiet tapping of rain on windows at night. The way reflections shifted, always a little too precise, always just out of sync. I moved again. A smaller apartment. Safer streets. I tried to reclaim ordinary life. Coffee, work, music. But trust had been fractured. Privacy became a construct I measured carefully. Phone calls screened, social media silent, windows curtained. Every shadow was a memory, every reflection a warning. Sometimes, at night, I see a lantern in the fog outside my window, and for a moment, the fear returns. But I breathe. I remember the law, the walls, the steps I took to survive. And I remember the boy, the calm, observing boy, who taught me, in his own terrifying way, that attention can be a weapon, and that obsession can live quietly in the spaces between moments. Memory is fragile. Trust is earned, often after loss. And identity can be watched, measured, cataloged without your knowing. I survived, but I am not the same. Because once you see the lantern man, once you know the weight of observation, you cannot forget. And the shadows will always remember you, even when the rain washes the streets clean. Story 7. I moved into the old apartment 2 weeks ago. Rain tapped the windows in uneven rhythms, neon from the corner store bleeding into the gray puddles of the street. The place smelled of dust and forgotten time. Silence had a weight here, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional floor creak, my own footsteps echoing too loudly. I was rebuilding. Divorce finalized. The apartment was my quiet, my isolation, my chance to remember who I was without someone else's voice in the walls. The attic was a dark corner I had avoided until last night. A loose floorboard, a small wooden box beneath the eaves. Music box, maybe a century old, the kind you see in antique shops, delicate brass engravings, a winding key sticking out like a finger beckoning. I wound it. The melody was soft, broken, like a lullaby whispered through fog. And then I heard it. Not the song. Whispers beneath the song. He won't come home tonight. I froze. My chest tightened. The attic smelled of dust, mothballs, decay. I told myself it was imagination. Maybe the box had a hidden speaker, some clever antique trick. I went to bed with the city outside breathing in rain and sirens. But the whispers didn't stop. They crept into dreams. Your father will fall. You can't stop it. I woke to my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. Check the street below. Now. I looked. A man in a gray coat, leaning against the lamppost, smoking. I didn't know him. My stomach ached. I told myself it made sense. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from the building. The next night, the whispers returned. Clearer. Events, precise, like someone reading my family's future aloud. Arguments, accidents, confessions. Details only I should know. Then he appeared. Elijah. I met him at the cafe, where I went to escape the apartment's silence. Warm coffee, soft jazz drifting, rain tapping windows. He noticed the way I stared at the steam curling above my cup. You always sit here? He asked, calm, observant. I nodded. He smiled, a quiet ease. He remembered the song I hummed absent-mindedly. My favorite mug. The way I twisted my ring when I was anxious. Small things I'd never told anyone. I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. Over the next days, I began seeing impossible coincidences. Messages appearing on my dating app before I wrote them. Photos of the apartment I didn't post. Voice notes, AI cloned, whispering fragments of my thoughts. Elijah never seemed surprised. He listened. He watched. He always knew the right thing to say. Calm. Reassuring. I wanted to believe it. I told myself I was overthinking. The whispers in the music box grew louder. My dreams started matching reality. Arguments with my brother. A kitchen fire narrowly avoided. Elijah's presence felt both comforting and predatory. He would text, I was here. I know. Every time I looked up, he wasn't there, but the traces remained. My coffee stirred, my keys on the floor, my blinds slightly askew. I noticed subtle manipulations. My routine was mapped, mirrored. He suggested routes home that intersected mine by chance. Or so I thought. He knew which cafes I preferred, which shows I watched alone. He called me by my childhood nickname once, and I almost collapsed. I told myself it made sense. I had mentioned it somewhere online. Weeks passed. My reflection in the apartment windows started to feel wrong, shadows moving behind me that shouldn't exist. The music box would play itself, notes dangling, whispering, she won't forgive. He will leave. My stomach churned. I wanted to leave the city, but every plan I made seemed anticipated. Elijah appeared in the right place at the right time, as if he were woven into the pattern of my life. Then I saw the photos. My family, my brother, my mother, taken from angles I hadn't realized were visible from the street. Metadata intact. He had been following me silently for weeks. Months, maybe. Every comfort, every laugh we shared, it had all been observation, study, control. I tried confronting him. Why? I whispered, trembling. He smiled, patient. I've always cared. I just want to protect you. I wanted to believe him. I told myself I was overreacting. The spiral accelerated. The music box became a conduit, a mirror. I began hearing my own voice in the whispers. You let him in. You should have known. You ignored the signs. One night, the city was silent but for rain. I heard footsteps in the attic. Not mine. Heavy, deliberate. The key in the music box turned itself. I found him there, calm, observing, every detail memorized. My childhood drawings, my favorite book, my broken guitar. I called the police. They came, traced devices, accounts, burner phones, AI recordings. Evidence of manipulation, multiple victims, constructed identities. Elijah was not a man. He was a campaign, a long-term obsession, curated over months, maybe years. He was arrested quietly. The music box was confiscated. My apartment searched. Photos, emails, voice clones, metadata, all revealed the depth of his invasion. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, aware. My apartment still hummed with the fridge, the AC, my footsteps. But now I noticed the small creaks, the sounds of objects shifting, as if waiting. My trust fractured. My reflection in the windows carried the weight of unseen observation. Months later, I returned to the cafe. Rain on neon streets. Steam curling from my cup. Elijah is gone. The music box is locked away in evidence. But I still hear fragments sometimes. Wind brushing the windows, the soft hum of appliances, whispers of events that could have been. I realize now trust is fragile. Privacy is an illusion. The smallest observation can become a manipulation, a campaign, a presence that bends reality. Even in safety, the mind remembers. It catalogs. It waits. I survive. But I am changed. Shadows move differently in my apartment. Songs carry warnings I cannot unhear. I walk the streets aware of reflections, footsteps, faint echoes in empty alleys. The music box taught me that fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers and waits. I learned boundaries aren't just physical. They are psychological, digital, emotional. Obsession is patient. Control is subtle. Memory can betray you. And yet I live. I walk. I breathe. I catalog. And maybe in the quiet, I understand what it means to truly guard yourself, not from the obvious dangers, but from the invisible, the intimate, the unseen. Story 8. Rain had soaked the city streets, turning neon signs into smeared reflections that pulsed on the asphalt. I walked home, my coat soaked, my coffee long gone cold in its paper cup. The apartment felt emptier than ever. Alone with 8-year-old Lena, trying to rebuild a life that had fractured into sharp, uneven pieces after my divorce. Nights were the hardest. The silence pressed against the walls like a living thing. Halloween was coming. Lena was excited, buzzing with energy I didn't have. I had promised her a costume, a pumpkin dress, a little witch hat. But the thought of the night outside the apartment, dark, wet streets, unknown faces, made my chest tighten. I tried to reassure myself. I told myself it made sense. I was overthinking. Then came the shop. It was small. A crooked sign read, Marlowe's Antiques. The window displayed dolls, dusty and porcelain pale. Their eyes caught the neon rain, reflecting it in tiny, impossible depths. Lena pressed her nose to the glass. Mom, look. I stepped inside. The air smelled of varnish and old fabric. Shelves sagged with dolls, each one frozen in lifelike poses. Some smiled faintly, almost knowingly. A man appeared from behind a counter. Mid-40s, gray in the temples, eyes sharp but warm. First time. His voice was calm, attentive, precise. Yes, I said. I'm Simon. These are Marlowe's creations, he gestured. He had a way of capturing children's imaginations, and something else. I smiled nervously, unsure. Lena clutched my hand. Can we see them closer? Of course. Simon leaned down to her level. You love dolls? Yes. Careful. Some of them remember. I laughed lightly. I wanted to believe he was harmless. I told myself it made sense. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the shop, the dolls, the way Simon seemed to notice everything, my tired posture, the faint tremor in my hands, the way I always hummed the same lullaby to Lena. It felt intrusive but comforting. Then the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the wind against the window. Lena's soft breathing in the other room. But the words were faint, insistent. Put her down. I froze. Lena was asleep, curled in her blanket. The sound came again. Not safe. I wanted to dismiss it. I told myself I was tired. I was imagining things. The next day, Simon texted. I thought of you and Lena today. Did she like the dolls? He knew her name. He knew our apartment number. I froze. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Maybe he had seen us in the shop. I told myself it made sense. Days passed. His attention grew subtle, obsessive. He appeared at cafes I frequented, knew my coffee order, knew the song I hummed while waiting in line. He referenced memories I hadn't told anyone, private ones from my childhood I thought long forgotten. I rationalized. I wanted to believe it. Then came the dolls. They arrived in the mail. No note. Boxes stacked neatly in the corner of my apartment. Each one lifelike, porcelain faces painted with such detail it was unsettling. Lena squealed with delight. I felt unease curl in my stomach. That night, I watched from the doorway as Lena slept. One doll had shifted, its head tilted slightly, as if observing. I shook my head. Impossible. Dolls didn't move. But the next morning, Lena said softly, "Mom, she moved." I told myself I was overthinking. I was exhausted. I was alone. Simon appeared again, uninvited. I thought you might like some company tonight. Halloween is intense. His eyes scanned the apartment, memorizing. You're very careful. I admire that. He knew when I bathed Lena. He knew when I cooked. He knew which music calmed her. He knew the corners of our life I didn't want anyone to see. I rationalized. I wanted to believe it was care, not intrusion. The whispers grew louder. Take her. Replace her. I noticed patterns. Dolls positioned differently each day. Furniture slightly shifted. Phone buzzing at odd hours with messages I didn't recognize. Voice notes of me talking to Lena, my own voice, recorded and replayed. Metadata showing devices I didn't own. I tried to leave, tried to escape the city. He anticipated it. Burner phones, fake profiles, tracking apps, AI-generated messages, all confirming he was always one step ahead. One night, I followed Lena into the hallway, only to find a doll sitting in the stairwell. It looked exactly like her. Same hair, same pajamas. My hands shook. Simon appeared behind me. Isn't it remarkable? The resemblance? Why are you doing this? My voice trembled. Because I see you, both of you, and I care. The confrontation escalated. Police were called. Evidence was gathered, emails, phone traces, metadata, dozens of victims across the state. His identity? Multiple aliases, a decades-long obsession, a campaign of surveillance and replacement. He was Simon, yes, but only on the surface. A constructed persona built to enter lives, observe, manipulate, consume. I watched him taken away in the rain. Neon reflections dancing on the wet asphalt, indifferent to our relief. Lena clung to me, eyes wide. We were safe, but changed. Back in the apartment, I unpacked the dolls carefully. Locked them away. Windows closed. Every sound, floor creaks, rain tapping glass, the hum of the fridge, felt like a warning. Halloween passed. The city went on. Cafes, neon, distant sirens. I walked the streets alone with Lena, holding her hand tightly. Every reflection reminded me of attention and observation. Every small movement a potential signal. I lit a candle near the locked dolls. Shadows stretched on the walls, long and quiet. I listened. The world hummed. Everything was alive with observation, and I knew I could never fully forget it. Trust had a cost. Privacy had a cost. Control was always an illusion. The hollow dolls weren't just objects, they were mirrors, reflecting my fear, my love, my vigilance. And perhaps in the end, that is what remained. The quiet, sharp knowledge that even in safety, the past watches, waits, and whispers. I exhaled. Lena slept beside me, unaware. I watched the shadows dance, remembered the whispers, and understood. The world will always notice. The world will always remember. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to notice yourself first. Story 9. The rain started quietly, a thin drizzle pattering on the windshield as I drove down empty streets. Neon signs flickered in puddles, fractured like my own life. 6 weeks ago, my girlfriend left, claiming I'd changed too much, or maybe she was right. My apartment felt hollow, every object a reminder of laughter that had evaporated. I needed work. I needed distance. Security at Greenwood Cemetery seemed simple enough. Quiet nights, minimal interaction, perfect for someone rebuilding themselves. I parked at the gate. Fog crawled over the gravestones, clinging like smoke to the ground. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked toward the small office. Inside, the monitors flickered weakly. Cameras covered rows of old tombstones, mausoleums, twisted oaks. I poured coffee and listened to the hum of fluorescent lights, the refrigerator's low drone, the occasional creak of pipes. My reflection in the window looked tired, hollow, but I told myself it made sense. I was tired. I was empty. I was safe here. The first few hours passed in monotony. Footsteps on the gravel, the distant sound of cars on the highway, the occasional hoot of an owl. But then the phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know you're here. I see you." I laughed bitterly. "Wrong number," I muttered. But a seed of unease had been planted. Hours later, I noticed movement near Section D, shadows, elongated by the moonlight, shifting between the graves. I squinted. No animals, no wind, just shapes, human shapes. Then, unmistakably, a woman emerged from the mist. Pale, dressed in a flowing gown that seemed more memory than fabric. Her eyes met mine, hollow, urgent. She raised a hand. "Help me." I froze. A story in the local newspaper mentioned grave-robbing pranksters. But this was different. There was intelligence in her gaze and fear, the kind that demanded acknowledgement. I approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" Her lips moved, silent. Then a voice, soft, layered, as if multiple tones were coalescing. "I've been waiting." The words made my chest tighten. Waiting for what? And yet, something inside me, something lonely, something desperate, wanted to help. I told myself it was the right thing. I told myself she was lost, like me. Over the next hours, I discovered more. Each figure that rose from the graves carried fragments of life, memories unfinished. A man relived his final argument with a brother. A child recreated a last birthday party, unaware of the years that had passed. They were not mindless. They were memory given flesh, seeking closure, justice, revenge. And they weren't forgiving. I tried to document it. My phone recorded ghostly figures walking past cameras, metadata showing no file had been created until I started filming. Emails arrived in my inbox, referencing my life, favorite coffee shops, my mother's old address, a song I hummed in the shower. I was being watched. Carefully, intimately. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking. Then I met her, Evelyn. She arrived like sunlight piercing fog. First at the cemetery gate, then in the quiet cafe I retreated to after my shift. Soft voice, observant eyes. She asked questions, remembered details I hadn't shared aloud. The way I stirred sugar, the tiny scar on my left hand from a kitchen accident years ago. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. I clung to her attentiveness like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I felt seen. But small impossibilities began. My social media accounts showed messages I didn't send. Photos appeared on my phone, me sleeping in the office, in the cafe, walking home. Angles only someone inside my life could know. Evelyn knew things she shouldn't. Things private, intimate. I rationalized. Maybe I'd shared them unknowingly, oversharing in my loneliness. Then the whispers started. At night, soft murmurs from the cemetery cameras. Footsteps in the hall outside my apartment. The hum of my fridge aligned with a vibration from my phone. A voice note, calm, layered, soft. "I know you're awake." I tried leaving the city, but the shapes followed, not physically, but in reflection. In neon puddles, in shadows cast by streetlights. Every turn, every mirror seemed to carry their gaze. I felt observed, tracked. My routines dissected. Emails, phone metadata, social media, dating apps, they all fed a network I could not escape. Evelyn remained constant, comforting, attentive. She arrived when I felt most vulnerable, offering warmth, guidance, even casual touches that anchored me. But each visit escalated tension. She knew where I hid my journals, my passwords, the burner phone I used to call her. She could anticipate my thoughts, my fears, my hesitations. I told myself she cared. I wanted to believe it. Then came the confrontation. A figure outside my window, a man wearing my coat. Not threatening, not overt, but precise. Calculated. Metadata confirmed my suspicions. A second identity for Evelyn. Multiple victims, multiple constructed personas. Years-long obsession. Tracking. Emotional manipulation. I called the police. Evidence compiled. Surveillance footage, emails, AI-generated voice notes, burner phones, GPS tracking. Evelyn's persona fractured under exposure. Her obsession wasn't supernatural, it was meticulously human. Obsessed, intelligent, dangerous. The final shift at Greenwood was chaos. Figures rose again, memories spilling into the night, wailing, pleading, angry. I guided officers through the cemetery, documenting each apparition. Evelyn appeared once more, calm, observing. "You see now," she said. Her voice carried layers, sadness, fascination, obsession. "You were part of the story all along." We left the cemetery at dawn. Rain softened, washing over the gravel, neon fading into gray. I felt hollow, changed. Some memories returned. Others had been overwritten, borrowed by shapes, by Evelyn, by the night. I understood, finally, the fragile boundary between identity and intrusion. Now, in my small apartment, city sounds filter in, distant sirens, footsteps on wet pavement, neon reflections in puddles, a soft jazz note from a cafe down the block. I lock doors, hide journals, monitor devices. But the memory of eyes and shadows, of whispered understanding, remains. I think of the dead I watched rise. Not monsters, but unfinished stories, seeking reconciliation, revenge, acknowledgement. And I think of Evelyn, not evil, but meticulous, intimate, obsessive. Trust, I realize, is fragile. Privacy, a temporary shield. Memory, a malleable canvas. We leave fragments of ourselves everywhere, streets, rooms, devices, hearts. And someone somewhere may pick them up, trace them, inhabit them. They may remember for us, rewrite for us, claim what we thought was ours alone. I survive, but survival has its own scars, quieter than flesh, deeper than blood. I watch reflections differently now. I hear footsteps I cannot trace. I feel a presence in spaces I occupy alone. And sometimes, late at night, when the rain taps the window, I wonder, if memory can rise from the ground, if obsession can take human form, then what of the pieces of ourselves we leave behind, willingly or not? Who owns our stories? Who claims the fragments of who we are, and who will remember, or forget, them when we are gone? Story 10. Rain tapped a slow rhythm against the neon-lit windows. I sat on the edge of the sofa, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the city blur into wet streaks of red and gold. The apartment smelled faintly of damp carpet and leftover takeout, and somewhere in the background, the refrigerator hummed like a distant, indifferent observer. I'd moved here a month ago, seeking distance from the wreckage of my life. Divorce papers, empty wine bottles, the faint trace of someone else's perfume lingering in the sheets. Halloween decorations cluttered the small living room. I told myself it was a distraction, a way to force cheer into a space that felt hollow. Pumpkins lined the windowsill, cobwebs draped awkwardly over shelves. Strings of flickering orange lights reflected off the rain-slick streets below. That's when I first heard it. A whisper, soft, deliberate, almost syllabic, seeping through the floorboards. I froze, heart thudding. "Hello!" My voice barely broke the silence. The floor creaked. Nothing else. I shrugged. Probably the heating or the pipes. I wanted to believe it. The next night, the whisper returned, sharper, like someone leaning close beneath my feet. "I see you." I laughed nervously, but the sound died quickly. My apartment felt colder than usual. The lights seemed dimmer, the shadows longer. I told myself it made sense. Old building, settling wood, my imagination running wild. It wasn't until a week later that he appeared, Liam. A chance encounter in the rain outside a 24-hour cafe. His coat was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, and he smiled like he'd known me before introductions were necessary. He offered a napkin, then an umbrella, then conversation that felt like warmth in the fog. "You seem careful," he said, eyes catching mine like he could see the fractures I tried to hide. I laughed, a little too sharply. Careful is the new reckless. We started meeting often. At first, brief encounters, coffees, small bookstores, rainy walks along streets that glimmered with reflections of neon signs. But gradually, he knew my routines. My favorite bench in the park. The jazz bar I slipped into when the nights felt too empty. Even old nicknames I hadn't used in years. I should have noticed. I should have paused. But there was comfort in knowing someone noticed me so completely. Someone seemed to understand the quiet hollows I carried. Maybe I was overthinking. Then the whispers grew louder. Not just beneath the floorboards, but in the apartment itself. Footsteps in the hallway when no one should be there. A low, rhythmic tapping in the ceiling. My phone buzzed at odd hours with muted notifications, the sender unknown. Emails arrived with no subject, text files attached containing fragments of conversations I had thought private. One night, I lifted a floorboard in the corner of the living room. The wood groaned, exposing a hollow space I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a small, dark room, no bigger than a closet. Damp, musty, smelling faintly of decay and mildew. And then I heard them, the voices. Hundreds of them, overlapping, quiet, terrified. Every whisper seemed familiar, yet distant, like echoes of lives that had been here long before mine. I shut the floorboard quickly, heart racing. I didn't sleep that night. I tried to rationalize it. Old building, echoes, hallucination. But each morning, the room called to me more insistently. Liam's presence intensified around the same time. He was always calm, attentive, unnervingly perceptive. He knew when I'd stayed up too late, when I skipped meals, even when I tried to avoid my reflection in the bathroom mirror. "I'm here," he said softly one night, sitting on the edge of my bed, the hum of the refrigerator filling the gaps between his words. "You don't have to do this alone." I wanted to believe it, but then came the small, impossible details. He knew what I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. He hummed tunes I'd only ever sung under my breath in the shower. Photos I had deleted months ago appeared as thumbnails in his phone, casually, as if they had been waiting for him. My online accounts, private, password protected, suddenly showed activity from strange IP addresses that traced back near the apartment. I told myself it made sense. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe someone had a key. Maybe I was paranoid. The whispers under the floorboards shifted again, now forming words I recognized. Names, dates, fragments of my past. They were warnings, I realized, messages trapped in the wood. And with each message, Liam seemed closer, literally inside my space, yet always just calm, observing, reading me. I began leaving the apartment, following routines meant to shake him, only to find traces of his presence everywhere. The cafe where I hid in a corner, a table reserved with my favorite pastry. The bookstore, a book open to a page I had dog-eared weeks ago. My phone buzzed with a voice note, my own voice, asking questions I hadn't yet asked aloud. I started leaving messages for myself, sticky notes, emails, recordings, evidence, reminders. But every time, I found he had anticipated me. He left the notes carefully folded on the floor, the emails marked as read. The voice notes replied to before I could even open them. The spiral accelerated. I installed cameras, trackers, encrypted apps, burner phones. I tried to map his movements, but it was like trying to catch fog. Every path I took, he mirrored. Every word I whispered, he already knew. One night, I returned home to find the floorboards lifted entirely. The hidden room now fully exposed, revealing shelves lined with objects, photos, letters, trinkets, items I didn't recognize but that carried an unmistakable intimacy. Every previous resident of this building, he had collected pieces of their lives too. He was not just aware, he was meticulous, patient, Obsessed. And then I saw him. Not waiting, not hiding. He was there, calm, sitting cross-legged inside the room, eyes bright and unafraid. "I wanted you to find it," he said, voice soft. "I wanted you to understand." They never did. Fear surged, cold and sharp. But beneath it, a curious clarity. This was no supernatural entity. No ghost. Just someone who had engineered control, traced every step, every thought, every flicker of vulnerability. I ran. Through the stairwell, through the rain, the city a blur of neon and wet asphalt. I called the police, leaving my apartment behind, evidence in hand, recordings on my phone, metadata, cameras, everything. When they investigated, they found the hidden room, the collection of stolen lives, and finally, him. A man using multiple identities, dating apps, burner phones, and AI-generated voices to reconstruct and invade the private moments of anyone who crossed his path. He was arrested quietly, without struggle, the calm in his eyes unnerving even to law enforcement. I returned weeks later, apartment empty, the whispers gone. Silence felt alien, too complete. I moved out, carrying my few belongings, my heart heavier with caution than before. And yet, even as I walked down the cold streets, the rain washing away the residue of fear, I couldn't escape the subtle tremor in my thoughts. Privacy, trust, the fragile walls we build around ourselves. They can be penetrated, dissected, made intimate by someone patient, intelligent, unrelenting. I think about the voices under the floorboards sometimes, not as a threat anymore, but as a warning. Each life leaves traces, and someone can follow them if they know how. Trust is not given. It is a currency, and obsession is the shadow market where it is traded. I walk carefully now through fog, neon, and rain. I let few inside. I question the ordinary. And sometimes, late at night, I listen to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of settling wood, and wonder who is waiting just below, patient, precise, and unbroken. Because the floorboards remember, and so do we.